Hello, hello. Welcome back to the My Sugar-Free Journey podcast. I'm here today with Erin Wathen. So Erin is a holistic health coach. She's food abuse counselor that I can't talk. And she's the inspiring author of Why Can't I Stick to My Diet, which is a very interesting book. She was nice enough to send me a copy of it, and I read through it. Very good book, and it puts, I think, the blame for why a lot of people can't stick to their diets and are facing a lot of weird health issues squarely where it belongs, which is, I believe, on massive sugar consumption, fructose consumption, and a lot of things that we're facing in our modern diet today. That's doing a lot of terrible things to our diet. And as you can tell, my dog is excited to be here too. She's barking at the door and barking at nobody. I'm so glad, Erin, to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved your intro.
Thank you. So let's kind of get into your background a little bit, because if my readers don't know anything about you, where did you come from? How did you figure this out? What were you like before you changed your diet?
Well, I grew up in California, very active kid, and when I was about 14, almost 15, I had a summer birthday. I went on my first diet, and I lost 30 pounds over a summer, which I thought was no big deal. Now I'm really horrified that nobody flat out put me in the hospital. But I just decided I wanted to have a boyfriend, and I thought it'd be much better chances if I lost my baby fat. And then I started losing weight and got attention and kept losing it. And that was great and all, but how do you keep it off? That's when I realized that was a problem. And I went to high school in the early 90s, for those of you who are millennials or whatever, and fat-free was the rage. So before then, I don't know I think it was more calorie driven. Right. But in the 90s, it was fat was the problem. So, fat-free bagel with fat-free cream cheese and a Diet Coke. Snackwells, and a Diet Coke. Always the Diet Coke. Right. So that was how I lived. And in my weight, like when I look at pictures of myself in college and high school, I'm like, I was just all over the map. So I was constantly on a diet because I couldn't keep my weight where I wanted it. Yet I was exercising like a champ. I was on swim teams. I was running. I was teaching swimming. I was always trying to fight my weight. And I was eating tons of sugar because it was fat-free and I was fine. Everyone always said. And during my entire journey, I think that word is misused, but it's applicable to the situation. I was never traditionally what you would say overweight. Like my BMI was always in the healthy range, but the problem was I was always up and down the range. I never knew what I was going to weigh. I never knew that my pants would fit next week. Right. So not just the physical problem, but the mental problem, which I know a lot of people have, is I was like beating myself up constantly. Was I good today? Was I bad today? How many calories did I eat? Can I undo it? Can I be skinny by Friday? I mean, it was just ongoing. And I kept thinking, when I'm out of college, I won't have this. Nope, didn't help. Grad school, nope, didn't help. Get married, nope, still crazy. It kept on going. I had my first daughter, yep, still obsessed. And then it wasn't until 3 years ago that I got really into nutrition, because I ended up becoming a certified spin teacher and yoga and classical Pilates and a bunch of other stuff like TRX and bar that no one really gets excited about, but still need to get certified to teach them. Because I kept thinking, well, maybe if I work out enough. Well, those of you that have tried to work out with exercise, first of all, it takes forever. Right. Second of all, it typically makes you hungry. And lastly, it's a really bad way to look at exercise. If you look at exercise purely as 500 calories is an hour on a treadmill equals a giant cookie, it's going to mess with your head. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at an hour on the treadmill as connecting with my body and building bones and it's part of my life, that's a lot safer headspace to live in. So once I really drilled down on, okay, this sugar's got to go. And when I realized I had little sugar stashes all throughout the house and the car. Right. And then I mean, come on. No, actually, a lot of people didn't. They didn't have candy in their bedside table. They didn't have candy in the console of their car. It was really crazy to hear this. So, and Diet Coke, how those came together. Because like I said, I was raised in the 90s where Diet Coke was perfectly acceptable.
Right.
And when I was in college, there was a 7-Eleven around the corner from my sorority. I remember going there in the morning. It was like 49 cents. You get this massive big gulp.
Yep.
And if you were really serious, you'd spend 69 cents and get the double gulp, which is like yay big. And just keep that sucker filled all day. So I was jacked up on Diet Coke. And for those of you that don't know this, and this was eye-opening for me, the artificial sweetener messes with our brain more than sugar, in that it gets our body and mind thinking sugar is coming, and then our mind and body works against us and creates a need for more sugar. So typically we end up eating more sugar than if we just had a traditional Coke, which I'm not advocating for either. But all that Diet Coke was counterintuitive to what I thought I was doing, which was losing weight, right?
Right.
So now I'm drinking gallons of Diet Coke and eating tons of gummy bears, because isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? So once I realized in my late 30s that I was doing everything wrong that I'd ever been, I might as well have just been eating cupcakes and drinking milkshake and at least enjoying my life versus dieting and being miserable. I didn't do that, by the way. I just started eating real food, drinking water, stopped asking my husband if my butt looked big all the time. And then I was able, I love the question, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I started losing weight, not from I was dieting, but I was like, I didn't even care if I lost weight because I wasn't overweight. I just was crazy in my head. I was weighing myself 10 times a day and just all this, just the obsessive thoughts. So once I was able to just find a way to eat that I could live on and sustain that, then the weight just fell off. And I'm now way less than I did after that big diet in high school without making myself crazy. It's effortless. I have clients now who, when they're like, so what is it like to be you? What do you mean? They're like, what is it like to not obsess about food? I said, well, what did you eat yesterday? And they'll just rattle it off. And I'm like, I could tell you I probably ate protein and vegetables for dinner, but I don't obsess about what I ate yesterday because I know it was fine. I said, when you've gotten to a point of being at peace with your body and food, it's not your friend, it's not your foe, it just is. So it is possible, but staying away from sugar and high fructose corn syrup is just an absolute must.
So how did you make that change to go from fat is bad to sugar is bad? What was there a book that you read, an article that you read? Because I can tell you, for me, there were some very specific things that happened that changed my thinking. Was there something that you ran into that started you down this different path?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in my holistic health coaching course, and they introduced food addiction. I'm like, what is this? And I was just Googling about it one day, and this woman with a very long last name came up out of Iceland. I was like, what? And she had a website. I just figured, what the heck, I'll email her. World-renowned expert in this niche field.
Right. I
was, hey, my name is Erin. I'm a what exactly do you do? I don't really understand it. Because in America, and I have a lot of theories as to why we're brainwashed and thinking this isn't possible. So I don't understand it. So how can you be addicted to food if I don't understand? It didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And within like an hour, she calls me. All right. And we're talking, and she's, a very nice woman. And she's like, tell me again, like why, and I said, look, I'm curious. I have, a lot of history of being obsessed with food. And she basically says, look, 3 weeks ago, I started this food addiction counseling program, and you have a master's degree already. So if you're interested and have the time, you could be in my program. Keep in mind, I was already in a health coaching program. So it was actually like complete stupidity on my part to say yes, but I thought it was a really good opportunity. So of course I said yes, and then I had to get my transcripts. I had a letters of recommendation, and I had to catch up for the last 3 weeks. And then I'm in this class with, PhDs, registered dietitians, and all these like really big deal people. And I was just sort of there to see what the heck they were talking about. And I had a very holistic idea about food, like moderation.
Right.
Moderation is great. I feel moderation are unicorns. It's urban myths, right? And I didn't understand the chemical part of food like I do now. I didn't understand the dopamine receptors. I didn't understand how fructose and sucrose and what they do to like block your pleasure sensors, what they do on a molecular level, what they do with the rats and all that. I didn't understand any of that. I just understood that I liked eating sugar a lot at one point in my life. That's all that my information was anecdotal at that point. So then I got, the actual, background. So I ended up having to go to Iceland for a while to study it at a higher level. And for me, it was slow and it was steady and it was very, very science-based. But then it completely made sense to personal stories. I remember of like eating all my kids' Easter candy and then having to go buy more before Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like just those sort of stories that happened a lot to me because all my life I was just obsessed with sugar. And everyone always thought it was cute. They thought it was cute because I was relatively thin. Well, it wouldn't have been cute if it was booze.
Right.
It wouldn't have been cute. So, but getting people to understand that this is actually an addiction is very hard to, at least in my community, people think it's weird.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I get it.
that word. Yeah.
So what is it about sugar specifically that makes it addictive? What are some of the things that my people need to know about sugar?
The thing that makes it addictive, well, first of all, if you looked at like sugar cane versus Domino sugar, which is just a brand name that we have in the Tri-State area, you wouldn't even recognize too. Because what they do to it to get it to table sugar that you would make a cookie out of is just you blow your mind. It takes so many steps and it's very much genetically modified to be as addictive as possible. So there's that. It's very, just the GMOs are crazy. But the way it's created now, it checks all your buttons in your brain, to make you as happy as you can be, as quickly as you can be. And with instant gratification, it comes in an instant and leaves in an instant.
Right.
And what I think is particularly damaging about that is the way in which a lot of people get this is through soda. So they're drinking it all day long. And it's Texas to South, or is it just Texas? Anyway, sweet tea is a good example.
So yeah. Sweet tea is, it's a big thing
all
here.
day long, right?
Yeah.
Or people I know that go from coffee in the morning, and then at one point in the day they switch to wine, which is also sugar.
Right.
So all day you're on sugar, because if you don't, you get a headache, you feel horrible, because that's a withdrawal. Do you do that, or do you just re-up? So when we're at that point, we have a decision to make. Now let's think about how our body reacts to, say, broccoli.
Right.
Do you have a decision to make after broccoli? Not usually. Yeah. You might feel a little bloated. But there's always a decision to make after sugar. And people will get in arguments with me about honey and stevia and monk fruit. There's still a decision to be made after those foods because you will still get jacked up on them. And I know it's very popular to eat keto desserts. People will fight with me about that one too. It still elevates your blood sugar. Pure and simple. And the best way to sustain your mood, to sustain your, insulin levels, like a bunch of stuff you want to, fat and all this other good stuff, is to not have sugar swings throughout the day, because it creates inflammation. Inflammation is disease, on and on and on. So the less swings you have, the better. So the less processed food you have, the better. And what's in processed food? Refined carbohydrates. What's a refined carbohydrate? Grain is often so refined, like in Pringles, for example, that it basically is sugar. So staying away from those sorts of foods is very, very important, not just for your weight, but for your health.
So what is a diet that's free of these processed foods? Like, what does that kind of a diet look like?
Are you asking me what I eat?
Yeah. What do you eat?
That's always a very popular question.
Yeah.
I just eat a lot of not normal. I eat a lot of food that comes from like the rails of the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I don't eat a lot of stuff that's processed. I'm thinking like I had avocado pudding for breakfast today. For lunch, I'll have
Never
tortillas.
heard of that avocado pudding.
It's avocado with like coconut cream, and I had some pecan
Okay.
berries. I'm not saying you need to eat it. I'm just telling you what I ate.
Mhm.
And then for lunch, I'm gonna have tortilla soup. It's when we're done. And I think I asked him to hold the tortillas. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. And then for dinner, I'll probably have like fish with spinach and goat cheese on top or something.
Mhm.
I don't really get obsessed with food anymore. Like it's not really like the high point of my day.
So you're just looking at fat, protein, and some veggies and calling
Yeah,
it a
which
day.
is insane because I was the kind of person that would get very excited when it was time to eat.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get that. And after I clean my diet up quite a bit too, but I'll still have an occasional dessert. But like it's a keto dessert or something that's high fat. Usually it's something that's like whipped cream based, to be honest with you. Whipped cream over sugar-free pudding sometimes is kind of what it is. But yeah, so I it's impressive the things that you can do with your health just by changing to a mostly whole foods diet,
Yeah.
and the things that the things that you can see change. Now you mentioned keto just a little bit earlier, and that's kind of what I am more than anything. But what's your view on like these kind of camps, keto, paleo, carnivore? How do you feel about these types of eating?
Well, it's interesting you asked me that because I don't know when this is going live, but there's this whole fight now with Jillian
Mm-hmm.
Michaels and Al Roker of all people
You're right.
about keto, and she's right in that like it isn't necessarily the most balanced thing if you don't do it properly. Like all these diets need to have an asterisk next to them. Because, for example, Dean Ornish's diet in the 80s, which everyone got very fat on, was low fat, high carbs. If you remember
Right.
the food pyramid from when you and I were kids,
Yeah.
on the base of the pyramid was about 11 servings of carbs. 11.
Mm-hmm.
Bread. 11 servings of bread, starch, carbs a day.
Right.
Now no
Exactly.
one says that, right? And then all the way at the top of the pyramid was oil.
Yep.
Now we flip it, right? So that's
Right.
keto is flipping that and ditching the oil, ditching the starch. So my take on the camps is it's very easy to have these little factions. And I've done keto. I've tried paleo. I got very fat on paleo because I didn't understand that you actually needed to, portion control.
Right.
And that dates kind of count as like fruit, as sugar. Eat enough dates, it's sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that. I've done all these things. I try everything so I can speak about it intelligently. Keto is fine. You just need to be very careful that you don't go crazy with the low carb part. You need to have enough vegetables, enough green leafy vegetables,
Right.
that you don't basically shut down your GI tract. I don't want to get too graphic on you, but
No, that's fine.
you need to keep those things moving.
Yeah, it is one of the interesting things about the carnivore camp is that is one of the things that they'll say is that you don't need fiber. And I'm actually at the tail end of 25 days so far of doing carnivore, and I mean it doesn't. I only go to the bathroom about once every 3 days.
That's what I was saying. I disagree because fiber is your friend, and 25, 50 grams of carbs, meaning broccoli, spinach, kale.
Right.
It will bring you out of ketosis, maybe, but it will also like make you a much happier guy. In that way.
Yeah, I think so. And that's what I don't know if I'm going to continue it after this month. I did want to give it a try for a month just to see what it is, and it turns out, sometimes I just want sometimes I just want a salad.
Are you
And
eating
I think
wrapped in meat all day, or what's happening?
yeah, it's just, well, I say all day. I'm just eating 2 times a day, but it's usually like for lunch, it'll be maybe a couple of eggs and bacon. And then dinner is steak or a hamburger. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all it takes to fill me up. Um, and then because I work night, or I work like from 4 in the morning till noon, so I'll get up in the morning, have coffee, and just fast until I get home about noon or so. So that that is probably the most interesting thing about doing carnivore, is that I not only do I not get hungry, but a lot of times when it comes time to eat, I'm making food for my wife and everything. I think, man, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to eat this. It's just those, the hunger signals are totally gone, for the most part. Now, like right now, I could eat because I haven't eaten yet so far today, and I've been up working all day. But it's sometimes it's hard to get enough hunger to eat dinner, and it's an interesting thing that the carnivore diet does to you, especially after you've done keto for 3 years. And I'm not totally sure it's 100% positive, but it's an experience. It's a different experience.
Have you done it under the supervision of some sort of a health practitioner?
No, I mean I go to the doctor every 6 months or so, but no, my big
Just a
thing that
renegade.
do what?
Just a renegade.
Yeah, well, the big thing that I track is my blood pressure, because that's the one health marker that is really, really variable for me, because I lost 200 pounds and my blood pressure is still high. Yeah. So, I've lost a ton of weight. I've changed, don't, no longer have metabolic syndrome. My wife doesn't have type 2 diabetes. We've done a lot of things with our health except for my blood pressure. So that's one of the things that I was trying to see. If I went a month, if I went a month doing carnivore, if that would drop my blood pressure. It really hadn't. It stayed about the same. But I wanted to see what would happen. And I know you're probably squirming right now because it seems pretty radical thing
I,
to do, but
I,
actually it hadn't been awful.
do you have you noticed anything else going on? Like, has your weight changed? Has your
Yeah,
mood
I've lost about 10
better?
pounds.
10 pounds?
Yeah, mood's about the same. I can't think of a pretty stable guy. The only other thing that I've noticed is that when it's time for me to exercise, to work out, it takes a little more effort for
Yeah.
me to like bring up the energy to actually go move, because I've never been the exercise guy. Like I've never been the guy that just loves going to the gym and lifting weights and everything. And but so I've noticed that sometimes it requires a little more effort. Now, some of that may just be because my schedule changed, and now I'm getting up at 3 in the morning to go to work, and I've never been a morning person either. So sometimes I get home and I just want to kind of sit on the couch and stare at the ceiling for a little bit and get my stuff together. But
Yeah.
that's it. I mean, that's pretty much it. But if weight loss was my only goal, I'd probably stick with this, because I'm seeing more weight come off. Um, I mean, 10 pounds, 11 pounds, 12 pounds really in 25 days is not an insignificant amount of weight loss, especially after doing keto for as long as I was. But it's not like, I don't know that I would ever recommend anyone else do this. But it is kind of an interesting thing to try and see how you respond to it.
How how did you lose 200 pounds?
Keto, just stopped eating sugar, stopped eating grains, and ate a lot more saturated fat, a lot more meat,
Was
and
it strict keto? Were you like doing the percentages and peeing on the sticks and all that kind of stuff? Or were you...
well, I did at the beginning just to see if I was making ketones, but I don't know if you know about I don't know if you know about the urine ketone strips, but after you've been in ketosis for, I want to say, um, the acetone, or not acetone, but the the ketoacetate, which, gosh, I hope I'm not saying that. You stop producing the ketone that shows up in the urine.
Mm.
Not that you stop producing it, but your body begins to use it more efficiently. So you don't, you'll stop peeing blue on a pee stick after a while if you're doing that.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So I can still measure on the very few occasions that I have access to one, I can still measure ketones on a breath or on a blood ketone test. But there's no need for me to pee on a ketone strip after a while. But yeah, I have done no sugar, no sugar, no grains, no polyunsaturated fats, and more meat and more vegetables for I'm going to say about 4 years now, and that's what took 200 pounds off. And then ketone, and then I've been doing carnivore for three weeks. I mean, that's pretty insignificant. I just happen to be at the tail end of it right now when I'm talking to you. Is the only reason I brought it up. But that's what it did for me. Being able to lose 200 pounds was quite a bit.
Okay. That's great. I mean, I know I've seen like amazing pictures on Pinterest or whatever, people that have lost hundreds of pounds on keto. And that was always one of my reservations about keto was there aren't a lot of long-term studies on it. And
Right.
in this for your listeners with diets, if you've ever noticed the Mediterranean diet is always number one, a lot of it's because there's so much freaking data on it. Yeah. It's not that it's necessarily the world's best diet. I mean, it is a very well balanced, but there needs to be data. You need to have 3 to 5 years of data, which is, by the way, all self-monitored, meaning there's not people actually coming to your house and weighing you all the time. It's people filling out their own stuff, emailing it to the scientists. So with keto, a lot of like my personal reservations for it, even last year, people asked me about it was, I don't know, because there isn't any data. So with each passing year, people like Erin, who have been on it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it is showing people can maintain it, because anyone can lose weight on anything. It's the maintaining it that's the $1 million question, actually probably $1 billion question, quite frankly. So we need that data for, okay, long-term, what happens?
Right. You are absolutely correct. And that is that it's that one specific idea. How long can you stick to is what most drew me to just not eating sugar, and I kind of slid backwards into ketogenic diet after a while, because, and this is kind of why I wanted to have you on and talk about this. I really believe that the number one, the sugar consumption, because the sugar consumption gives you, it hits so many dopamine receptors. It gives you such a feeling of joy that you're like a rat going back and hitting that bell again to get that treat. Yeah. And it's hard to stick to something that doesn't have that instant dopamine hit. So, I know I can tell you that when I cut out sugar, it took weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks to really get to the point where I wasn't craving sugar, where I wasn't willing to leave the house in the middle of the night to go get a pint of Ben and Jerry's, where I was, it wasn't like an obsessive thing where I was thinking about and having to work to kind of replace the joy that I got from sugar with other joys, like the joy of seeing the number on the scale go down, the number, to see that I could buy new pants because, the pants were getting smaller, and new belts and things like that. That took a long time to get to. And, now 3.5, 4, however many years in, actually close to 5 now. It's still not 100%. Like if I really think that if I wanted to like slip up, I could probably go eat a dozen donuts, if my life depended on it. Yeah, I think I probably could.
If your life depended on it, you could eat donuts.
Yeah, absolutely. And enjoy the heck out of it. But it's these ideas of how to tackle food addiction and how to deal with food addiction. That's kind of why I wanted to have you on, because I think you've got your finger on the right lever, that it's the sugar consumption. But I wanted to have somebody on here that's looked at this. So talk to us about food addiction, why sugar drives food addiction, and what are some of the, maybe just give us some tips. What can we do to deal with these, these addictive properties that sugar has over us?
Sure, no problem. The thing about, just for everyone that isn't you and I and geek out on this stuff, about dopamine's the pleasure sensor in our brain. So like you said, you had to replace the huge dopamine hit of eating Ben and Jerry's with this small dopamine hit of seeing the number getting lower, right? So if you want to see the dopamine hit of the ice cream was 100, these are just numbers I'm pulling out of the sky. Right. And seeing a smaller number would have been like a 10, right? But over time, those twins get enough 10s in a row, you're like, I don't want the ice cream anymore. So think about like Facebook, right? It's social. It's very condensed social. Well, one-on-one, not as fun sometimes, but it can also be bad. So a lot of these pleasures are condensed. So when we start to realize that ice cream and sugar and soda are made in labs to hit every one of our buttons as quickly and as efficiently as possible, you'll start looking at food differently. Because if you look at an apple, which I don't want to get in an argument with you about, like, how apples are kind of altered a little bit, but if an apple, you're going to eat it, you're going to feel a little bit of like a little bump because it's got a little bit of naturally occurring sugar. It's nothing like a can of Coke. Even though they both have 25 grams of carbohydrates, they're very different carbohydrates. I mean, very different. They're both carbs, so don't overdo it on the fruit, but you're not going to have the same chemical reaction in your brain. So when we eat a piece of, fibrous fruit like an apple, we're going to have a little bit of, oh, that was nice, but we're not going to have the, oh, this was fabulous, like if we had a can of Coke. So when we're making choices after what we eat, a really easy way, just where does it come from in the grocery store? Is it going to come from the outside or the inside? Because almost every grocery store in America is pretty much set up the same way. You walk into produce, the back wall is meat, and the side wall is dairy. So by dairy meaning milk, eggs, cheese, and ice cream is kind of in the center, right? It's in the freezer section. So, potato chips, frozen pizza, like all that stuff is in the middle. So, I mean, coffee you can obviously have, but most things that aren't healthy are in the middle because they've been modified and processed. And the thing about processed is it's processed. It's previously managed to make it as efficient as possible when it hits your bloodstream. That is why the Gatorade hits you so quickly. That is why we have all these things that we believe are good, and they're really not. They just make you happy a little bit. And because it's so cheap, there's a high fructose corn syrup in bizarre things like hot dog buns. So if you wanted to buy hot dog buns, you can get hot dog buns without all that stuff. You're just going to have to do some reading when you're in the aisle. So a really easy way is like, where in the store is it located? And like I said, just stick to the outside. But and also when you're making choices, be aware that you can ask for exactly what you need in a restaurant. Who cares if they don't like you? Ask questions, get it on the side, tell them what you're doing. A lot of people are allergic or on specific diets because your health is worth it. I mean, it's your health. And I think Mark Hyman said this, or one of those celebrity doctors, that 100 years ago, the biggest concern was preventable disease. So like polio, diphtheria, everything, consumption, whatever that was. I don't think that was in every movie, right? People are dying of consumption. We don't even know if that really was. Right. Now it's all preventable diseases. And most of them we can prevent from where we hang out in the grocery store. So heart disease, diabetes, obesity, you know, all these things where it's like, where are you hanging out, you know? So drinking water, like eating vegetables. And what I hear often too is it's so expensive to eat that way. It can and it can't be.
Right.
If you're getting everything already pre-cut, pre-made, pre, of course it's going to be more than if you actually take the chicken and cut it apart yourself. Every time it's handled, it's going to be more expensive. But learning how to do it, yeah, it'll take a while, but it's not going to be worth heart disease. So like, let's make it relative for all the co-pays you're going to need when you have that quadruple bypass. So look at all the choices you make adding up to major decisions, and there being a fork in the road. So for me, I already had health consequences from eating all that sugar that nobody even told me about, which just blows my mind. So I was getting cavities all the time. Nobody said anything to me at the dentist, dental assistant, no one ever said, what are you drinking and eating? Oh, this just happens. And they would just drill it and hand me a bill for $1,000. My dermatologist, I was still getting really bad acne late into my 30s. Oh, this is hormones. And they would just, you know, inject it, drill it, cream it, whatever. No one ever asked me what I was eating. You know, a bunch of other weird things happened, that all these things went away when I stopped inhaling so much sugar and artificial sweetener. And I just remember thinking, like, what the heck, people? Like, why weren't the doctors saying anything? And that also happens with people who have chronic diseases or even autoimmune. Like, for instance, I know people that have rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, and no one ever talks to them about their diets. They just hand them pills. So you can do a lot of self-healing.
And the funny thing is, the thing that I've always it's just blown me away is that when you take your dog to the vet, it doesn't really matter what's the problem with the dog or the cat or whatever. It's the first question they ask is, what is this animal eating? Because the vets know that that's the most important question that you can ask to figure out most of the issues that are wrong with most animals. And if you can fix their diet, you can fix a lot of the things that are wrong with the dog. But your doctors, they don't ever think to ask that.
Yeah, you're right. Because when I was talking to my dermatologist about the skin, why I wrote a column or a blog about skin and acne, she was really interested because she didn't get any training on nutrition and she's a top of the line doctor who's like she does like US international, you know, big woo woo stuff. She said, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. You never told me, like, lay off processed food. Just here, we're going to burn something off your face for $800. So I agree. Like, it is fascinating. The dogs are asked, but the owners are not. What have you been eating? And you know, we can definitely do a lot. Just drinking water, that will do a lot. So yeah, no, I think those are definitely my tips. But also when I talk to clients about sugar and food and all of these topics, what I think is really important is we keep in mind that there's always a decision that's made ahead of it. And it could be a 3-second decision or an hour-long decision. For example, you're having a bad day and you pick up the ice cream, right? Because you deserved it. That's what you're telling yourself. Next thing you know, you're hitting the bottom of it. Or it could be you and your wife decide you're going to dinner, you talk about it, you call, you make a reservation, you know it's a place that you have zero control when you go there. So one decision took not as long as the other, but both times a decision was made. So when we are thinking about food and when we overeat or things don't go the right way, there was usually a time when they could have. So owning our decisions, not in a self-flagellation kind of a way, but in a let's examine it from almost like a scientist. So why did we go left instead of right? Okay, so we were feeling sorry for ourselves or whatever. But just be aware, the only thing that food can solve is true hunger. It's not your friend. It's not a celebration. It's nothing but fuel if used properly.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned not eating processed foods, making sure that you shop the perimeter of the store, um, taking care when you go to different restaurants. Another tip that I like to give, and because it was the most important thing for me, was when you decide to start eating this way, to go into your kitchen and throw away all the food that you can't eat anymore, because it's a lot harder to cheat if you have to work to go get the food. If you've got ice cream in the freezer, it's a lot easier just to grab it and right out of the freezer than it is to have to go to the store and buy it. And you've got some time. It puts that delay of effort, that delay of time between you and cheating and messing up your diet.
No, I agree. I definitely agree, because with me, I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. So if I lived alone, I'd have a very different kitchen.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I
Unfortunately,
totally agree.
but in my office, all I have in my little kitchen, my little, kitchen area is seltzer.
Yeah.
I don't have any,
Exactly.
because I don't want this to be a place that I can eat. The only rooms I eat in my house are the kitchen and the dining room, because the next thing you know, you're eating in bed. So it's like, being very specific, like not eating in the car, like things like that. Those sort of like daily guidelines you give to yourself help a lot. But yeah, cleaning out your cabinet, not eating after dinner, like all these little things, they add up, because you know why? They added up in the wrong direction for you as well.
Right.
So I also always tell my people that whenever you eat, make sure you have, this wouldn't work for you right now because you're doing that caveman thing, but protein, fat, fiber, and a low glycemic carb. So for example, like I said, if you're having like a filet mignon and you're having a cream spinach, you would like check all the boxes, because you should always have a carb, meaning something that isn't, a baked potato, because that would jack your blood sugar. But we do need the right kind of carbs to live. And carbs have gotten a really bad rap, but most people don't understand them. They don't really understand. Like I had a friend once didn't understand that sushi rice counted.
Right.
And, so it's just kind of a buzzword. And when we actually go back to, like I said, with the Dean Ornish book he wrote in the 80s and see the ramifications of it as a society, it's frightening. And now everyone's so low carb, high fat, which is fine. I think that's definitely helpful. But we always need to remember that portions count.
Okay. So what inspired you to write your book?
Well, a couple things. I knew that women would read it if it was on an e-reader after 50 Shades of Grey. But
okay.
So 50 Shades of Grey came out, I don't remember, 6-7 years ago now. And it was a worldwide phenomenon, partially because of the e-reader.
Right.
So, not just the mommy porn part, but also because women would read things on a Kindle, on an ebook, on an iPad. They might not necessarily read at home, because a big blue book saying why can't I stick to my diet is a pretty bold statement on the soccer field. So I wanted to get the information out there as quickly as possible, but I also wanted to get it out in a way of service almost, because I wanted to read the book that I needed, because I needed this information. Instead I had to go find it. So I found it for you. And it's short, doesn't take long to read. It's pretty simple. And there's so many diet books out there that never talk about the after. They're all about, you just lose 20 pounds and then life is good. But you lose 20 pounds, then what? Like it's that always screws us up, because my theory on the whole thing is, you gained a bunch of weight. All right, so maybe you overdid it in the holidays, right? And you gained weight, and now you want to lose it. Okay, we're losing weight, but why did you overdo it in the holidays?
Right.
What was the motivator? Because there's a cookie here and an eggnog there, but you gained 15 pounds, and you didn't just gain it in December. So what's not working? Because you know what? It might be there when you're done with doing this green sludge thing. So let's talk about that, because maybe you need to rearrange your day so you're not overbooked, or whatever it is that's more systemic or life-based, because food is not the problem. It's usually the symptom. It becomes a problem. But the problem is almost always our life and our relationships. So let's tinker with that. But nobody wants to do that. It's so much easier to count points or carbs or cut out macros than to have that conversation with our boyfriend or tell our mother we're putting up a boundary. So let's just, count points.
No, I totally get it. Well, Erin, I appreciate you coming on the show. Can you tell my listeners like where to find your book, where to find out more about you, and maybe tell us a little bit, because I forgot to ask you, what is it that you do for people?
What do I do all day, right?
Yeah, right.
My kids went to a presentation once, and my 9-year-old was like, "All you do is talk." I'm like, "Well, what did you mean?" I was into magic. I am a holistic health coach. I also blog and do a bunch of like guest commentaries on stuff. So I have a health practice where I help women, mostly women, like lose weight and just really do a lot of what I talked about, not just have you lose weight at the end, but get you to really see your thoughts that got you there. Because sure, you could, lose 10 pounds, never think about it again, but you gain them back because you hadn't gotten to the symptomatic part.
Right.
So that's where all my training comes into play, because I'm a holistic health coach and a food addiction counselor and a life coach. It all kind of is a beast, right? My website is Erin Wathen Wellness, and that's where most of my contact information is. So it's pretty easy to find me. But I think it's really important that people be aware that with, food addiction, it is definitely not something that most Americans have really embraced yet. And that's fine. You can call it whatever you want, but just know and acknowledge in your own self how much of an impact food has on your mood, your energy level.
Right.
And when you have extreme cravings, that's what it is. Like when people are like, "Oh, I really have a hankering for something," I'm like, it's not because of the commercial. It's
Right.
the commercial might have reminded you of, the bloomin' onion or whatever, but it's not that. It's all the other things. So hopefully one day Americans will be a little more open to the concept of it, because there's a lot of room for improvement here. But right now it's fine that it's a little out there.
Well, good. Well, guys, we're going to put links to all of that in the show notes. You can find that at mysugarfreejourney.com/podcast. And Erin, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it. And guys, we'll be right back with some more information.